Where there is now a third woman accusing Brett Kavanaugh of sexual misconduct. According to her lawyer, Michael Avenatti, who we should note has his own political aspirations, Julie Swetnick has leveled a series of accusations dating back to the 1980s. In a sworn declaration, Swetnick accused Kavanaugh and his friend Mark Judge of excessive drinking and inappropriate conduct with women. She says Kavanaugh, Judge, and others would spike the punch at high school parties with drugs and grain alcohol so as to cause girls to lose their inhibitions and their ability to say no. She says they targeted vulnerable girls who were shy or alone, and that she witnessed efforts to get the inebriated or disoriented girls into a side bedroom so they could be gang raped by a train of numerous boys. Swetnick says it also happened to her. Quote, in approximately 1982, I became the victim of one of these gang or train rapes where Mark Judge and Brett Kavanaugh were present. Shortly after the incident, I shared what had transpired with at least 2 other people. During the incident, I was incapacitated without my consent and unable to fight off the boys raping me. I believe I was drugged using Quaaludes or something similar placed in what I was drinking. Kavanaugh called Swetnick's allegations ridiculous and from the Twilight Zone. I don't know who this is, he said, and this never happened. Even with this new allegation, Senate Republicans have a vote scheduled for Friday and still plan to go forward with tomorrow's hearing. And the White House has released Kavanaugh's prepared testimony for that hearing. In it, he talks about his high school years. Quote, I was not perfect in those days, just as I am not perfect today. I drank beer with my friends, usually on weekends. Sometimes I had too many. In retrospect, I said and did things in high school that make me cringe now. But that's not why we are here today. I never did anything remotely resembling what Dr. Ford describes. Still, he denies any and all sexual misconduct. But now that there are 3 women making extremely serious allegations, our big question today is, if a hearing does take place tomorrow, is a hearing with just one of Kavanaugh's accusers enough? Joining me, NBC's Kate Snow, Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Hake, labor and employment litigation lawyer at Smith, Mullin Counselors at Law, Nancy Erika Smith, and managing director at Sar Verbitten and Company, Lisa Green. Guys, welcome. Garrett, first to you, the latest on what's happening in the Senate. You have Jeff Merkley trying to file a suit to stop this confirmation process. Chuck Schumer wants this nomination to be withdrawn. You also have Lindsey Graham coming out and vehemently defending Brett Kavanaugh after these third allegations. And a moment ago, Jeff Flake was on the floor urging everybody to treat everyone involved as a human being. Where do things stand?
Yeah, it's hard to follow the bouncing ball up here right now, Katie, but let's set the tone here. There is this hearing that's going to happen tomorrow morning and the opportunity for a committee vote that could happen as soon as Friday. Remember, conservatives have said that they want to get Kennedy's replacement, Judge Kavanaugh in this case, seated on the court when the session opens October 1st. That would be Monday. That's the timeline we're up against here. Republicans are trying to force this to stay on that timeline.
Garrett, I'm sorry, Donald Trump is talking right now. We're going to go right to him.
And I think you're going to see it in the midterms. I think people are wise to it. It's just a con game. He's a high-quality person. They're bringing people out of the woods. They can do that to anybody. They can do it to anybody, other than perhaps Prime Minister Abiy, because he's so pure. But they can do it to anybody, what they are doing. And it's really, really sad. If you look at this lawyer that just came out, he's a lowlife. He represented Democrats. Nobody ever talks about that. He's a Democrat lawyer. Not a very good one, but he's a Democrat lawyer. So it's a horrible con game. I think the people are finding it out. And hopefully over the next couple of days it will be settled up and solved. And we will have a Supreme Court justice who will go down as one of our greatest ever. Hopefully he's going to be there for a long time. He's a young man, and he'll be there for a long time. And I'll be very proud of him, just as I'm very proud of Justice Gorsuch. So I think it's really working out very well. I really do. I think it's doing well. I think people are seeing what a disgrace these Democrat senators are when they come out with statements like that. when they don't even talk about it, and then after the hearings are completely over, they come out with what they come out with. It's a disgrace what's going on. The good news is the public is very smart, and they get it.
But
Okay?
do you think all the women are lying? Are all 3 women lying?
What's your next question?
Mr. President, could you explain why an ad in the Des Moines Register amounts to election interference by China? Why an ad in the Des Moines Register amounts to election
Well, take a look
interference?
at it. You have not only ads, you have statements made that they're going to hit our farmers, who are my voters. I love the farmers. I'm taking care of the farmers. I'm opening up markets like nobody's ever opened markets before, because right now we have closed markets, whether it's the European Union.
We're going to continue our conversation about Brett Kavanaugh. Garrett Haake, if you're still with us, the president has continually called all of these allegations a con game set up by the Democrats. He calls it a disgrace. He was asked just a moment ago if all 3 women are lying. He notably chose not to answer that question, said next question. My question to you is that how all Republicans feel, that this is one Democratic con game? I know Lindsey Graham has come out with vocal support of Brett Kavanaugh. So has Mitch McConnell. But are there any Republicans that we're not hearing from that are feeling a little bit more uneasy with this than the president is?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely there are, Katie. It's very clear there are 2 distinct camps here at this point. There are those who see this entire last week or so of these allegations against Kavanaugh as purely political, thought to be designed to bring him down. Lindsey Graham said yesterday, if someone like this can be destroyed by merely an accusation without evidence 30 years later, that there's no chance for anybody else up here to survive, that it's purely the politics of personal destruction. But there is a quiet minority of Republican senators who are deeply concerned about this. Folks like the names that we talk about often, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Bob Corker, Jeff Flake, who spoke on the floor a little while ago about his concerns about all this. But there is, I think, a larger universe of folks who do not go on television, who go out of their way to avoid being part of this conversation, who are going to be watching very, very closely tomorrow to see if Dr. Ford is credible. Remember, for the most of these folks, the ones who are not on the Judiciary Committee, but who will be asked to vote next week, all they know about Dr. Ford is what has been in the Washington Post and what we have discussed. They have not necessarily seen all the documents, all the interviews that staff have done. They have not been privy to all that information, and they will be put on the spot come potentially as early as Tuesday to make a decision about this. So there is, I think, a larger universe of Republicans who are keeping their powder dry here and withholding judgment until they see exactly what happens on Thursday. And frankly, how many more accusations we might be facing against Judge Kavanaugh by Tuesday. This has all developed just so fast. It's impossible to say what the scene here will look like come Tuesday morning if they're able to vote even that soon.
Well, let me ask you one other question, Garrett. Is there anyone pushing in the Republican Party to add more women, more of these accusers to the hearing tomorrow, so it's not just Dr. Ford and Brett Kavanaugh?
I think that's unlikely. I've certainly not heard that done in public. I have heard, some rumblings that there's senators who are interested in hearing from these other accusers if that can be done. But I think purely from a logistical standpoint, the opportunity to get anyone else here at the table tomorrow is not going to happen. And Katie, I think there is pushback here from Republican leadership who see every new accuser as a drip, 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 a chance to delay this even further and essentially kill this nomination by 1,000 cuts. They want to stick to this timeline in no small part because that's one way they think they can sort of stop this from getting any worse. The sooner they vote, the sooner these things they feel will be behind them.
Garrett Haake, thanks so much for joining us. I know you've got a lot of reporting to do, so we're going to let you go. Kate Snow, the president looms over all of this, as he does with everything. I know that there was a push early on when these accusations came out to hold him back, to get him to not tweet anything that would potentially be detrimental. That has gone by the wayside. Clearly. Now what he is doing and what other Republicans are doing are seizing on the person representing the latest accuser, Michael Avenatti, who does have his own political aspirations, who has been a lightning rod, who has been a thorn in the president's side. The president tweeted this. Avenatti is a third-rate lawyer who is good at making false accusations like he did on me and like he is now doing on Judge Brett Kavanaugh. He is just looking for attention and doesn't want people to look at his past record and relationships a total lowlife. Clearly, they're trying to shift the focus from the accuser to the man representing her.
Yeah, and I think it's important to kind of separate these two things. I mentioned earlier today on another, I think at noon with Andrea, that yes, Michael Avenatti has a political past, because I think it's worth noting that, but that is separate and apart from this declaration that we have from his client, Julie Swetnick, which is, as you read at the beginning of the hour, Katie, a detailed description of heinous crimes. I mean, so brutal that it's difficult to read some of this without feeling something. She's talking about gang rape. She's talking about really brutal treatment of women. So that in itself is something that normally, typically, I think would, if someone came forward with a declaration like this, draw the attention of law enforcement if she went to police. Now, we don't know if she has submitted this to any kind of law enforcement agency, Katie. We don't know that.
Wouldn't it be past the statute of limitations?
It probably is. The lawyers may know better than I, but Maryland, I don't know exactly what their statute is. I'll have to check.
What is it?
Well, so for some violent sex crimes, the statute of limitation is more forgiving, but we'd have to look state by state. But further to the Avenatti point that Kate is raising, there is no Michael Avenatti exception to calling a witness before the Senate if she has meaningful evidence for what the Senate has to do, which is actually quite simple. Determine whether Judge Kavanaugh has the requisite character and fitness to ascend to the Supreme Court of the United States. That's really it. Really different than a criminal case where a judge would be really conservative about allowing what are called prior bad acts, evidence of events that happened that are different than the event at issue. This should be a larger kaleidoscopic look at everything relevant, particularly when Judge Kavanaugh tomorrow will say before the Senate, and I'm quoting from his statement, I have always promoted the equality and dignity of women. And it's really time for the Senate Judiciary Committee to examine that statement in its full effect.
I know you want to jump in.
Yeah, well, unfortunately for Judge Kavanaugh, he's portrayed himself as a choir boy and a virgin. And putting aside the allegations of 3 women who have put themselves out there, one will testify under oath tomorrow. One's already testified under oath. Their declaration is under oath. Putting that aside, we have his yearbook, his sexism in his yearbook, his drinking in his yearbook. We have Mark Judge writing a book about his alcoholism and those years with a character named Bart O'Kavanaugh. We have his Yale roommate saying he was inebriated all the time. We have Yale students saying he was, we want to take back our support. We have Yale students saying we were groomed as women to be his clerks to look like models.
Because he was a heavy drinker, does that mean that you can jump and say that he is a sexual criminal, that he behaved inappropriately with women, that he, I mean, that there's a difference between I was a heavy drinker and I tried to rape girls?
Well, what he said under oath was that he was a choir boy, unfortunately for him. He sold himself as I went to church, I did service, I got straight A's, and I was athletic. That's how he sold himself. He didn't sell himself as, until recently, oh, well, I did some things I'm not ashamed of. That's his new line. But if we look at where he was, he belonged to an organization, an all-male organization called Tit and Clit.
That was the nickname.
Yeah, the nickname, right, that he accepted.
That was the Yale Secret Society.
And his fraternity. Yet no means yes, and yes means anal.
Well,
I mean, there's a lot of evidence.
Read another portion from Julie Swetnick's declaration. Again, Kate was talking about how detailed it was. It's a 14-point declaration. You can read it in its entirety for yourself online. Here's another portion. And again, she describes Brett Kavanaugh and his friend Mark Judge as being present for a lot of these scenarios. She does not say definitively, and her language is very specific, that Brett Kavanaugh was the one who inappropriately touched her, or Brett Kavanaugh was the one who raped her. But here's what she talks about when she's talking about Brett Kavanaugh directly. I observed Brett Kavanaugh drink excessively at many of these parties and engage in abusive and physically aggressive behavior toward girls, including pressing girls against him without their consent, grinding against girls, and attempting to remove or shift girls' clothing to expose private body parts. I likewise observed him to be verbally abusive toward girls by making crude sexual comments to them that were designed to demean, humiliate, and embarrass them. I often witnessed Brett Kavanaugh speak in a demeaning manner about girls in general, as well as specific girls by name. I also witnessed Brett Kavanaugh behave as a mean drunk on many occasions at these parties. I guess when you're talking about specific girls by name, some backup to that sort of allegation is what was in the yearbook.
It goes much further than that, though, too, Katie.
Yeah.
I think just for clarity, after what you just read, she goes on to describe in the years 1981-82, she became aware of Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge, his friend, spiking the punch at house parties that she was at. And then she goes on to describe what we mentioned before, gang rape of women or girls in a side room or bedroom by a, quote, train of numerous boys. And then she describes a very specific incident that she says happened in approximately 1982.
But she says specifically that she says they were present for this, but she's not saying Brett Kavanaugh.
Well, yeah, we can probably show that on the screen. It's the one that begins in approximately 1982. I became the victim of one of these gang or train rapes where Mark Judge and Brett Kavanaugh were present. Earlier, I think it was in the 1 o'clock hour, Craig Melvin asked Michael Avenatti about that. Does that mean that Brett Kavanaugh didn't do these things? And Michael's answer was very legal, but he said, no, you're incorrect. She's not saying he never did these things.
Interesting. We're going to take a quick break, guys. Kate Snow, Garrett Haake, Nancy Erika Smith, and Lisa Green, thank you. Beth Wilkinson.